I never thought a simple dinner with a friend would become the beginning of the end of my marriage. That afternoon, I was exhausted, my body heavy after an endless week of work and household duties. When Laura, my best friend, insisted that we go out to dinner downtown, I almost turned her down. My plan was to stay home, order some fast food, and go to bed early. But she convinced me. "You need air to get out a little. Let's go to a nice restaurant. I'll buy the first drink." And, as always, I ended up agreeing. The restaurant she took me to wasn't exactly my style. It had that elegant, modern air of places where every dish looks more like a piece of art than an actual meal. The lights were warm and dim, with hanging lamps glowing like low stars. There was soft background music, a live piano. The tables were covered with spotless white tablecloths, and each glass sparkled like crystal from a jeweler's case. I already felt out of place from the moment we walked in, but I pretended to be comfortable so as not to ruin the night. We were seated near the window, from where we could see the entire main hall. Laura spoke animatedly about her work, a new project, and a colleague who had been driving her crazy. I listened, smiled, and nodded, until suddenly I lifted my eyes and everything inside me collapsed. There he was, my husband, the man with whom I had shared a roof, a bed, and a life for over 10 years. Sitting at a table not far from ours, in the crisp white shirt I loved so much, perfectly ironed, and with that smile that had once been mine alone. But that night, it wasn't for me. In front of him sat a young woman with shiny brown hair and a red dress that looked tailored for her. She leaned over the table with a flirtatious smile as she toyed with her wine glass. Every gesture between them spoke of intimacy, complicity, a closeness that doesn't develop in just a couple of hours. The way she brushed her hand across the table, the way he didn't pull away, the spark in his eyes when she laughed. It was all too obvious. I felt a sharp blow in my stomach, as if the air had been ripped away from me. My heart started pounding, and for a moment I thought I might faint. Laura noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she whispered, alarmed. I couldn't speak. I only gestured toward the table with my eyes, and when she understood, her eyes widened. "It can't be," she murmured. "That's—" I nodded, a knot tightening in my throat. I didn't want to hear her finish the sentence. It was my husband. It was him, sitting there, dining with another woman, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. My first reaction was rage. I wanted to get up, march to his table, scream in his face, demand explanations, and make everyone in the restaurant see what kind of man he really was. But I restrained myself not out of fear, but because something inside me ignited with coldness. A different fire. Dignity. I wasn't going to give him the spectacle of a jealous, scorned wife. I wasn't going to let him see me weak, not even for a second. I forced myself to breathe deeply. My hands trembled under the table, but on my face, I drew a neutral expression. Laura squeezed my hand tightly. "What are you going to do?" she asked, worried. I didn't have the answer at that moment. I only knew I couldn't just sit there pretending nothing was happening. That was when I noticed the waiter serving them a young man in his 30s, kind-faced, moving with the professional grace of someone who had seen everything at these luxury tables. And then the idea hit me. Risky, bold, but perfect. I pulled a small notepad and pen from my purse. While Laura watched me, puzzled, I wrote a few words on a card I usually kept for reminders. My hands still shook, but determination was stronger. When I finished, I carefully folded the card and slipped it into an empty envelope I had in my bag. I called our waiter over, and with a calm smile, handed him the envelope, along with a napkin on which I'd written, "Please deliver this to the waiter at table 14. Tell him it's urgent and that he must not ask questions." Alongside the napkin, I left a folded bill as an extra tip. The waiter looked confused, but nodded. He took the envelope and minutes later discreetly handed it to the other waiter. I watched everything from my seat. My heart lodged in my throat. It felt like I was directing a play where each actor performed without knowing the full script. The waiter at my husband's table opened the envelope and read my note. His brow furrowed, and then he glanced sideways at me as if seeking confirmation. I held his gaze firmly without flinching. He seemed to understand that he wasn't to ask questions and headed back to table 14, the folded card in his hand. Meanwhile, my husband and his lover laughed, oblivious to what was about to happen. She touched his arm. He leaned toward her as though whispering a secret. The sight cut me like a knife, but it also gave me more strength. I knew that within seconds, everything would change. The waiter stopped beside them. Calmly, he placed a new dish on the table and, along with the cutlery, set down the folded card. I saw my husband look at it with surprise, picking it up between his fingers without understanding what it was. His lover watched curiously, unsuspecting of what it contained. I held my breath. Beside me, Laura gripped my hand tightly. "What did you write?" she whispered. I only answered with a bitter smile, because I knew that the moment he opened that paper, the entire charade would be exposed. The waiter stepped back, and I remained still, eyes fixed on the scene that was about to explode before every diner in that elegant restaurant. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but to me, it felt eternal. My husband stared at the folded card, suspicious, as if it were just an innocent note, a courtesy from the restaurant. His lover tilted her head toward him, smiling, eager to share the surprise. But when he finally unfolded the paper and his eyes scanned the first lines, his face changed completely. The color drained from his skin as if he'd seen a ghost. His lips parted, but no words came out. He quickly shut the note, as if trying to hide it. But it was already too late. The woman across from him leaned closer, curious and nervous, and managed to read over his shoulder. What she discovered left her frozen. My words had been short, direct, impossible to misinterpret. "Enjoy your dinner. Tomorrow we'll discuss the divorce papers. P.S. The woman in front of you asked for a cheap glass of wine, yet you treat her like a queen. What a shame. I always deserved better." His lover jerked back in her chair as if slapped by an invisible hand. Her smile vanished, replaced with a grimace of shame and anger. My words had unmasked her, and in that instant she realized she was nothing more than the other one, the intruder, the shadow behind a story already written. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice tense with indignation. My husband tried to compose himself, but failed. His hands shook as he fumbled with the paper, trying to shove it into his jacket pocket. I could see his rigid shoulders, the tight press of his lips, and the sweat shining on his forehead under the restaurant lights. "It's nothing," he muttered in a thin voice. But she wasn't naive. She snatched the paper from his hands and read it in full, her eyes widening more with each word. When she finished, she lifted her gaze toward me, and for a long moment our eyes locked. Her expression shifted from surprise to discomfort, and finally to pure fury. "You took me for a fool," she spat at him, pushing back her chair abruptly. Her voice rang through the restaurant, catching the attention of nearby tables. "You didn't even have the decency to tell me you were married." He tried to calm her, reaching for her arm, but she recoiled instantly with a gesture of disgust. Adjusting her handbag like a shield, she raised her voice even higher. "This is humiliating. I will not be part of your lies." Without another word, she stormed out of the restaurant, her hurried steps leaving behind a trail of cheap perfume that clashed with the place's elegance. The waiter, still standing nearby, watched the scene with a mix of confusion and quiet satisfaction. He didn't fully understand what had just happened, but he knew he had delivered something that had changed the course of that night forever. My husband remained alone, the paper still in his hand, dozens of eyes fixed on him, shame stabbing into his skin like needles. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, head lowered like a scolded child. I kept watching from a distance, each second feeding not just my pain but also a sense of justice. Laura leaned toward me and whispered, "You humiliated him. I don't know how you stayed so calm." I didn't answer. My eyes stayed locked on him, on his nervous gestures, the way he tugged at his collar as if it were choking him, the way he glanced around searching for an escape he couldn't find. The diners murmured among themselves. Some laughed discreetly, others made quick judgments. The once elegant man at table 14 had in mere minutes gone from a confident, successful husband to a humiliated, abandoned man. I breathed deeply, and for the first time in weeks, I felt in control. I hadn't shouted, hadn't cried, hadn't made a scene. I had destroyed him with nothing but a piece of paper, a sharp message, and the best part was that I had done it without ever losing my dignity. I stood up from my seat. Laura tried to stop me with her gaze, afraid I might confront him and spark a bigger scene, but my mind was already made up. I walked calmly toward the exit, passing right by his table. He looked up, startled, as if only then realizing I was there. Our eyes met, and for a brief moment I saw in his the reflection of everything we had shared. Years together, promises, laughter, countless nights. But now it was all stained by betrayal. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Instead, I gave him a serene smile, one that hid all my fury and my resolve, and waved a quiet goodbye. It was enough for him to understand that there was no turning back. I kept walking, without looking over my shoulder. The moment I stepped outside, the cool night air filled my lungs with a freedom I had long forgotten. Behind me remained a man, alone and drowning in shame, while dozens of eyes devoured him. Laura caught up with me a few seconds later, still shaken. "I can't believe it," she said, half laughing nervously. It was like watching a movie. I looked at her, and though the pain still sat deep in my chest, there was also a strange calm. That night, I hadn't become a victim. I had become the protagonist of my own story. I had taken the first step toward my freedom, and he had felt it like a blow that would scar him forever. The murmur of the restaurant faded behind us as I walked on, certain that this unexpected dinner had changed my life forever. That night, I didn't return home. I couldn't. Just imagining him walking into our bedroom as if nothing had happened made my stomach churn. I stayed at Laura's apartment, where she prepared a makeshift bed on the couch and offered me a glass of wine to calm my nerves. I barely sipped it. I didn't want to cloud my mind, I needed clarity. Every thought, every memory, every decision ahead had to be sharp. My phone buzzed endlessly. Calls, messages, desperate notifications from him. I didn't answer. I let it ring until the battery finally died, and in a way, the silence that followed felt like relief. The next morning, waking up on a foreign couch, with a stiff body and a heavy head, reality struck me again. It hadn't been a nightmare. I had seen it with my own eyes, exposed him in front of everyone, and now there was no way back. I walked to Laura's window and stared at the traffic below, wondering how it was possible that everything I had built over more than a decade had crumbled in just minutes. It didn't take long before another message from him arrived, this one longer than the others, written with desperation. "I need to talk to you. It wasn't what you think. I swear I can explain. Please, give me a chance. I love you." I read it over and over, but those words no longer had a place in me. Love. Explanations. All of it had turned to ashes on that restaurant table the night before. I switched off my phone and set it aside. Laura watched me with compassion, but I asked her not to say anything. I didn't want comforting words or hasty advice. I wanted silence, to put my soul in order. 2 days passed before I finally agreed to see him. I arranged it at our house because I wanted it on my terms, under my rules. When he arrived, I immediately noticed how different he looked. Dark circles under his eyes, his suit wrinkled, as if he hadn't slept in days. He tried to smile when he saw me, but it came out crooked, laced with nerves. "I didn't want you to find out that way," he began, barely crossing the door. I stood firm, arms crossed, unmoving. "And how else should I have found out? By waiting until the day you brought her home and introduced her as your secretary?" I spat coldly. He fell silent, gaze lowered. For the first time in a long while, he looked weak, almost small. He stepped closer with his hands outstretched, as if begging. "It's not what you think, I swear. It was just a meal, a mistake, something meaningless. She doesn't mean anything." A bitter laugh escaped me on its own. "Nothing?" I raised my voice. "Nothing is looking at her the way you once looked at me. Nothing is holding her hand, smiling at her as if she were your world. Don't underestimate me. I was there. I saw every gesture, every glance." He buried his face in his hands, exasperated. "I made a mistake, a stupid mistake, but I want to fix it. Please, give me another chance. I swear it won't happen again." I watched him with a calmness that even surprised me. I had cried so much inside during those 2 days that I no longer had tears left. All that remained was certainty. I walked over to the living room cabinet and pulled out an envelope I had already prepared. Without hesitation, I handed it to him. He opened it, and when he saw the papers inside, his face crumpled in pain. "Divorce," he whispered in disbelief. I nodded, looking him straight in the eyes. "Yes, divorce. I will not stay tied to someone who humiliates me in public, betrays me in private, and then tries to cover it with cheap excuses." Began to stammer, to beg. He even knelt in front of me, something I never imagined he would do. He pleaded that I reconsider, that I think about all the years we had spent together, about the promises we had made. I listened, but deep down, I knew those promises had died the night he gave to someone else what should have been mine. Then, I showed him the photographs I had taken discreetly from my table. Yes, I had been cold enough to capture some images with my phone, him and her, laughing, holding hands, sharing glasses of wine. His face tightened even more. He knew there was no escape, no excuse that could erase that evidence. "I'm sorry," he said in a trembling voice. "I'm sorry too," I replied, unflinching. "Sorry because once I thought you were the man of my life, but now I know I deserve better." He stayed there, kneeling, broken, while I gathered my things and wore my determination like armor. I asked him to sign the papers without making a scene, to at least give me that last act of respect. He didn't answer then, but I knew that sooner or later he would. Not because he wanted to, but because he had no other choice. The following days felt strange. On one hand, the emptiness of a shared life collapsing. On the other, a sense of relief, of breathing fresh air again. After so long, I discovered that I could walk down the street without feeling the weight of his lies, that I could look at myself in the mirror without wondering where I had failed, because I finally understood I hadn't failed. He had been the one to destroy what we had. Weeks later, I received an unexpected message. It was from the waiter at the restaurant, the same one who had delivered my note. He had gotten my number through Laura, who had shared it with him at some point without telling me. The message was brief, almost shy. I just wanted to thank you for the tip that night and also tell you that you showed me something important sometimes. A single napkin can change lives. Stay strong. M.